Cool. All right, guys. So we're here today, and Michael asked me to do a favor here, and it's going to be awesome to be able to talk to Grant. Grant is a new and upcoming entrepreneur, kind of wondering what's happening in this market and everything else. So Grant's going to have a few questions that he's going to ask me, and we're going to try to deliver as much value as possible in the short time that we are together. So let's get after it. What's up, Grant?
Hello, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good, thank you. All right, so just to really quick to start, my first question is about your background. So, could you just give a little bit of information about your experience in investing and specifically about real estate, if any? Yeah.
Yeah, well, cool. Well, my background was not in real estate. My background was in the hospitality industry. I was a busboy, server, cook, dishwasher at my parents' restaurant for literally the first 24, 25, 26 years of my life. I mean, I was 12 when they opened up the restaurant, and that's all I knew is how to really take care of people and serve them and, help them out. And then when I was sitting at the bar booth, at 23 actually, some guy said, "Hey, you want to sell real estate?" And I said, "Sure. What do we got to do?" Start selling property, make commission checks. Boom, passed my test, and I was off to the races on becoming a real estate, agent or real estate realtor, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that was back in 2002. So that's where I started. And obviously now our trajectory is a lot different now. We buy, we flip, we sell. I've kind of mastered the buyer side, the listing side, and then we start buying houses at the appointments. And now we're an investor. Now I'm on the show and helping you hopefully get motivated there.
Thank you. So my next question is about how early you're going to be starting doing like real estate investing versus more traditional options like stocks or bond trading. So how early do you think you should be starting, and how accessible do you think it is to the younger generation?
So it depends on what you want out of it. Obviously, if you're going to start early in anything, and the longer you last in something, we talk about this all the time in the market, whatever that is, will outperform anyone trying to time the market. And that's something where I've been doing this for 23 years. So the longer you do something, the longer you're going to be successful. The more opportunities are going to come to you, and then you're going to develop a skill set based on experience and time versus the guy that just started and doesn't know much but gets lucky. So either way, if you're going to do something, you want to be into it early as possible and for the longest time, in it. So that's the true success that I've been seeing, that people that are in the business for a long period of time and they understand it and they know it, they end up having more of a success later. So yeah, that's something that start early, man. How old are you?
16.
Yeah, dude, you're 16 years old and you're going to be on this podcast asking a bunch of millionaires what they've done. So yeah, dude, you're starting off really, really well. I was not doing this at 16, neither was Michael. So huge thing.
Thank you. So,
Yeah.
my next question is about actually purchasing properties. So you talk about how you have experienced like a lot on the buyer side. So what are some things that you're looking for when you're actually going into purchasing a property? What does your like process look like?
If I'm purchasing a property, one thing I'll share with you, the deal is always made when you buy it. It's always made when you buy it. Not when you sell it, because you have to buy it like low enough or deep enough. If the value is 300,000, you're buying it for 100. You have $200,000 of spread. That means regardless of what the market does, if it goes up and down, you're still going to be okay. So my advice to you would be, if you're going to buy anything, make sure that you know your numbers. Make sure that you know the exit. If you're going to wholesale it, flip it, keep it as a rental, those three margins are different. You have to have a huge margin to flip it. You don't need much of margin. You actually need a bigger margin to wholesale it, because you got to leave money on the table for the next guy to flip it. And if you're going to keep it, the margin doesn't need to be that big, because you're keeping that asset for long term and you're going to rent it out, et cetera, et cetera. Just like Michael has with all of his rentals, the margins were a lot thinner but he knew that it was a long game. So that's something I look for, is how much room I have to the market, so it does adjust, or when it does adjust, I'm not negative on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So in that process of purchasing, what are some tools that you use, like maybe sites or just things in general that you use to determine or just help you along in the process of making a purchase?
You know what? That's a good question, because there's a lot of softwares out there. I use Property Radar. Property Radar is awesome. I mean, there's literally there's Privy, there's Property Radar. There is, uh, geez, there's so many. I mean, even your Google, even your Zillow, even just Zillow it. Realtor.com. It gives you a somewhat of a fair market value, and if you're 200K under, um, then you're sitting pretty. So my go-to is PropStream and Property Radar.
Great, thank you. So my next question is about if you were able to restart your career, what's something that you would do differently? So
Ooh,
maybe starting like, I don't know, maybe my age or college age, what would you do differently?
honestly, I would want to get in better rooms early. What you're doing right now, this is a room that you're in right now at 16 years old, learning and asking questions about real estate that most 16-year-olds don't do at all. But the time's different now. So if I were to do it all over again, 100%, I would want to get into other rooms faster, quicker, find out who the big players are in the space that I'm trying to be in. And at that point, at 16, I wasn't in no space. I was just still going to school, almost graduated, and then I went to college to play baseball. So my career was different. But as far as when I got licensed and in the field, I wish that I would have branched out a little bit more to put myself in other rooms of super huge, successful real estate agents at the time, because, success leaves clues. So if you're there around other people that are doing big things, making two, three, $4,000 at that time was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money now, but at 23, you weren't making that kind of money. Only the big shots were. So I would say get into bigger rooms, ask more questions like you're doing so now, and try to model or mirror the people that are actually doing a lot of business. And then they'll help. We're an open book. We'll tell you, because you got to go do the work.
All right. So my next question is kind of related to that. So for when you're a total beginner, what do you think is one of the most important things for you to know?
In what field though? Because when you're a beginner in real estate,
Yeah, I would say probably specific to real estate or
okay.
maybe investing in general if you have any more general advice.
The most important part, if you're starting out into any type of business, is first find out what you want. Like, what do you want out of this, the next year? Do you want to absorb as much knowledge as possible, and then make, the decision, or then pull the trigger and get the contract, or go meet the seller to get a contract to hopefully wholesale. Because to be honest, in the very beginning, if you're in this real estate game, if you're going to go the avenue of getting a real estate license, which I recommend you do because you always have it, right? And you know the logistics of it. Do you need it? No. Can you just be a straight wholesaler right now at 16? Yes. You can go talk to a seller, find out their timing and motivation, if they have equity in their property or not. And if they want to sell it for less than market value, get it under contract and you sell it to somebody like me or like Michael, and you make $20,000 like that, depending on, where you get the property at. But if I were to give you an advice when you're starting out, absorb as much knowledge as possible, and don't be afraid to fail because you're starting out early. because that's just part of the process. You want to fail forward, you want to fail often, because later on you won't be failing because you're going to master that every time that you do fail is a lesson. So it's kind of what I would have to say.
Great, thank you. So my last question is going to be, what do you think is one mistake that young investors should be avoiding?
Oh, this is huge. The success that comes with a new investor, that's the biggest freaking mistake, is that you had a lot of success and then you let it get to your head. And then you go buy the car, you go buy the watch, you go buy the stuff that's unnecessary, and you don't really know much. You just had one good season. That's the difference between like a baseball player that has one good season or a subpar season but consistent over time. Those are the ones that stay longer in the game, and those are the ones that are in the Hall of Fame, if that makes sense. And I reference it to a baseball analogy because there's always the guy that had a great game. There's always the guy that had the great one season. There's always the guy that had maybe two seasons that were phenomenal, but it got to his head. He didn't do the work anymore. They got him the first and second grade season, meaning the first or the first and second grade year of a real estate investor. You figure out like what got you there and you stay with the basics so you can have, all these years stacked up upon next thing you know, you're 10 years in and you're like, damn, this turned out well. I wasn't just the one hitter quitter type deal, what they want to call it. So that's something that you should definitely understand. Anyone that's starting this game.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to answer my questions. I'm gonna hand it back over to Mr. Zuber.
Cool.